Imagine spending billions of dollars to build the most powerful bomb ever designed, only to discover that your greatest opponent wasn't an army, it was a mountain and the patience of the people who dug beneath it. That's the uncomfortable truth at the heart of this story. For years, the world believed military technology could solve almost any strategic problem. But what happens when engineering collides with geology, politics collides with reality, and victory is declared long before the evidence arrives? Tonight, we're not just examining a bomb or a bunker. We're examining a dangerous illusion, the belief that overwhelming power automatically produces lasting security. For years, one simple assumption shaped the way governments, intelligence agencies, and military planners looked at Iran's nuclear program. If you could find the facility, you could destroy it. That had been the pattern before. Iraq learned it. Syria learned it. Air power had become the ultimate equalizer, capable of reaching almost any target on Earth. But Iran studied those lessons just as carefully as everyone else did, and instead of asking how to defend another building, it asked a far more difficult question. What if the building disappeared into the mountain itself? That's the moment this story stopped being about concrete and steel. It became a story about patience, calculation, and the quiet confidence that sometimes changes history more than explosions ever can. Think about what it means to spend years carving tunnels through solid rock, moving millions of tons of earth, investing enormous national resources into something very few people would ever see. That isn't just construction. That's strategy taking physical form. Every meter dug into the mountain represented another message to the outside world. You may have bigger bombs, but you cannot bomb what you cannot reach. And that's the pain point most people miss, because we're conditioned to believe technology always wins. Every new headline celebrates the latest weapon, the newest aircraft, the next generation of military innovation. We rarely stop to ask whether the other side has been solving the same problem in a completely different way. Sometimes the most effective defense isn't building a better shield. Sometimes it's forcing your opponent into an increasingly expensive race that they can never truly finish. That's exactly what Fordo represented. It wasn't simply a nuclear site buried beneath hundreds of feet of rock. It was a challenge thrown directly at the world's most advanced military powers. It questioned an assumption that had guided strategic thinking for decades, that no target was beyond reach if enough force could be applied. Suddenly, that confidence looked less certain. And here's where the story becomes uncomfortable. When governments publicly describe military superiority, they often speak as though every problem has a technical solution. More funding, better weapons, faster aircraft, smarter missiles. But mountains don't negotiate with political speeches. Granite doesn't respond to press conferences. Nature has its own rules. And for years, Iran believed those rules were stronger than any weapon ever built. Whether you agree with Iran's government is beside the point. Understanding the logic behind the decision is what matters. They weren't placing their faith in diplomacy. They weren't trusting international agreements. They were trusting geology, something that cannot be sanctioned, intimidated, or persuaded. That decision forced every military planner looking at Fordo to confront an unsettling reality. The deeper the tunnels became, the more expensive every future military option would become. And that reveals a larger truth about modern conflict. Wars are no longer fought only with soldiers or missiles. They are fought with engineering projects, economic endurance, long-term planning, and the willingness to think 20 years ahead while everyone else is focused on tomorrow's headlines. Because once one nation decided that a mountain could become its strongest fortress, another nation became determined to prove that even a mountain could be defeated. If Fordo represented faith in the permanence of stone, the American response represented faith in something entirely different, the belief that no obstacle is permanent if enough engineering talent, money, and time are devoted to overcoming it. That difference in thinking tells you almost everything about the two sides of this story. One side trusted the mountain. The other trusted the people who design machines capable of rewriting what seems physically impossible. But here's what often gets overlooked. The weapon that eventually captured the world's attention wasn't built in a rush. It wasn't the result of a single crisis or one president's decision. It was the product of years of quiet work carried out far from television cameras and campaign speeches. While headlines shifted from one international emergency to another, engineers kept solving a single problem, piece by piece, year after year. That should make all of us pause. Because we often imagine governments reacting to events. In reality, the most consequential decisions are frequently made long before the public even knows a problem exists. Long-term military planning doesn't operate on election cycles. It doesn't wait for public opinion polls. It moves on timelines measured in decades, investing billions into capabilities that may never be used, but must exist if the moment ever comes. That kind of commitment reveals something larger than military strength. It reveals national priorities. Imagine dedicating 15 years of research, testing, redesigns, simulations, metallurgy, software development, manufacturing, and countless failed experiments to produce a weapon intended for essentially one category of target. Not a weapon for every battlefield, not a weapon for every war, one problem, one mountain, one calculation. Think about what that says about the scale of modern defense spending. Entire industries are built around preparing for possibilities rather than certainties. Universities train specialists. Private contractors receive long-term funding. Supply chains stretch across states and continents. Every improvement creates another contract. Every contract creates another technological breakthrough. And every breakthrough encourages another nation to search for a cheaper way to cancel it out. That's where the economics become impossible to ignore. Building an extraordinary weapon is breathtakingly expensive. Digging deeper into a mountain is often dramatically cheaper. One side invests billions to increase penetration by another few meters. The other invests far less to excavate another few dozen. Suddenly, this isn't simply an engineering competition. It's an economic contest where each side is trying to force the other into spending more resources than the strategy itself is worth. History has shown us this pattern before. Every great military innovation eventually produces an equally determined countermeasure. Battleships led to submarines. Heavy bombers led to advanced air defenses. Aircraft carriers inspired anti-ship missiles. Every technological advantage carries within it the blueprint for someone else's response. That's why this story matters far beyond one bomb or one underground facility. It exposes a cycle that has quietly shaped international politics for generations. Governments promise security through innovation. Their rivals answer with adaptation. The first government responds with even greater investment. Before long, entire national budgets become tied to solving problems created by the previous solution. And while engineers deserve enormous credit for accomplishing what many believed couldn't be done, their success also highlights an uncomfortable political reality. Technical achievement does not automatically produce strategic certainty. A remarkable machine can demonstrate extraordinary capability while still leaving the larger question unresolved. Because after 15 years of relentless engineering, after billions of dollars and some of the most advanced scientific work ever devoted to a single military objective, the world was still left asking the same question it had asked from the beginning. Had the mountain truly been defeated, or had the race simply entered its next chapter? Then came the moment neither side could avoid. It was no longer simply a contest between two governments. It became a contest between engineering and geology, between what human ingenuity could design and what nature had already built over millions of years. America placed its confidence in precision, metallurgy, and physics. Iran placed its confidence in the silent strength of a mountain that had existed long before modern nations were ever imagined. That collision reveals something many people overlook about power. We tend to believe that every obstacle has a technological solution if enough money is invested. But the laws of physics are remarkably indifferent to political ambition. Every additional foot of solid rock forces engineers to rethink years of design, while every additional foot of excavation costs a fraction of what it takes to build the next generation of penetrating weapons. And that's the cycle that should concern every taxpayer, every policymaker, and every citizen watching from afar. Each new breakthrough doesn't end the competition, it simply raises its price. One side develops a more sophisticated weapon, the other side digs a little deeper. The result isn't lasting security. It's an ever-expanding contest where billions are spent chasing an advantage that grows increasingly temporary. The real question was never whether a bomb could challenge a mountain. It was whether engineering could ever permanently outrun determination. Then came Operation Midnight Hammer, And for a brief moment, it appeared the debate was over. The headlines were decisive, the official statements were confident. The world was told that the mission had achieved exactly what it set out to accomplish. But if history teaches us anything, it's that the first version of victory is often written before the evidence is fully examined. This is the pain point every informed citizen should recognize. In modern conflicts, the battle doesn't end when the bombs stop falling. It shifts to press briefings, intelligence assessments, satellite imagery, and competing narratives. Governments naturally emphasize success. Intelligence agencies weigh probabilities. Independent analysts ask uncomfortable questions. And the public is left trying to determine where confidence ends and certainty begins. That's why skepticism isn't cynicism, it's responsibility. The question was never simply whether the bombs hit their targets. The real question was whether the strategic objective had actually been achieved, or whether political messaging had moved faster than the available evidence. Those are two very different things. Because in geopolitics, perception can shape markets, alliances, and public opinion long before the facts are fully established. And that's why the most important battle after Operation Midnight Hammer wasn't fought inside the mountain, it was fought over who would define what the mountain had become. Once the explosions faded, a different kind of war began, one fought without missiles, but with intelligence reports, satellite images, intercepted communications, and carefully chosen public statements. This is the part of modern conflict that rarely receives the same attention. Yet it often determines how history remembers the war itself. Think about the position of the public. You're told a target has been destroyed, then days later a leaked assessment suggests something very different. Another agency disputes that conclusion. Allies release their own evaluations. International inspectors lose access. Suddenly, certainty becomes almost impossible to find. The battlefield hasn't disappeared. It has simply moved into the realm of information. That should concern all of us, because democracies rely on informed citizens, not just confident headlines. When independent verification becomes impossible, narratives begin filling the gaps where evidence cannot. Markets react, alliances shift, and political leaders make decisions based on assessments that may continue changing for months or even years. This is why intelligence has become one of the most valuable strategic assets in the world. It's no longer enough to strike a target. You also have to convince allies, adversaries, and your own citizens that the strike accomplished what was intended. Because in today's world, controlling the narrative can be almost as valuable as controlling the battlefield itself. Now, step back from the military maps and look at the ledger books. Because this story is just as much about economics as it is about engineering. Every new bunker-busting weapon requires years of research, specialized manufacturing, testing, logistics, and billions of dollars in public investment. Yet the response on the other side can be remarkably straightforward. Dig another tunnel, reinforce another chamber, excavate a little deeper. That imbalance should make every taxpayer pay attention. Modern arms races are not won simply by building better technology. They're sustained by who can afford to keep playing the game. When one side spends enormous sums to gain a temporary advantage, the other side often spends a fraction of that amount to reduce its effectiveness. It's a cycle that rarely produces a permanent solution, but it almost always produces another round of spending. And that's the hidden cost of strategic competition. Resources devoted to staying ahead in this contest are resources that cannot be invested elsewhere, whether in infrastructure, education, healthcare, or economic growth. Nations make these choices because security matters, but those choices always carry an opportunity cost that citizens ultimately finance. Because sometimes the most expensive victory is the one that guarantees the next, even more expensive confrontation. This is where military success and strategic success begin to part ways. Destroying a target is measurable. You can count craters, damaged buildings, and destroyed equipment. But strategy asks a much harder question. Did the strike change the long-term behavior or capabilities of your opponent? Those are not the same achievement. History repeatedly reminds us that nations can rebuild factories, reopen tunnels, repair roads, and replace infrastructure far faster than many expect. What is much harder to destroy is institutional knowledge, engineering expertise, and the determination to continue. If those survive, today's tactical victory can become tomorrow's strategic challenge. That distinction matters because political leaders often celebrate what can be seen immediately, while the consequences unfold quietly over months or years. Citizens hear words like mission accomplished or objective achieved, but history has a habit of asking for a second opinion after the cameras leave. The true measure of success isn't what happened on the first day after the strike, it's what still holds true years later. That's why strategy demands patience as much as strength. Winning a battle may change the map for a moment, winning the future requires changing the calculations of the adversary. And that is always the more difficult victory to achieve. What we're witnessing now is no longer a traditional arms race measured by the number of tanks, aircraft, or missiles. It's an arms race taking place beneath the Earth's surface. Every time one nation develops a more powerful weapon capable of reaching deeper underground, another nation responds by digging deeper still, redesigning its infrastructure around the assumption that future wars will begin where the surface ends. That should give all of us pause, because this competition has no obvious finish line. It's fueled by engineering on one side and excavation on the other, with both demanding enormous investments of time, resources, and political commitment. The public rarely sees these projects while they're being built, yet taxpayers ultimately fund one side of the equation while the other quietly reshapes its defenses out of sight. The troubling reality is that every technological breakthrough encourages another round of adaptation. Security becomes a moving target rather than a destination. The deeper one side buries its assets, the more sophisticated and expensive the response becomes, and the cycle repeats. That's why this isn't simply a contest between bombs and bunkers. It's a contest over endurance, economic capacity, and who can continue adapting longer than the other. Because the most important battlefield of the next generation may be the one the world never sees beneath its feet. After everything we've examined, the mountains, the bombs, the engineering, the intelligence debates, and the enormous economic costs, it becomes clear that declaring a simple winner misses the deeper story. One side demonstrated extraordinary technological capability. The other demonstrated remarkable strategic patience and adaptation. Neither outcome erased the other. Instead, both reshaped the next phase of the competition. Perhaps the greatest lesson is that time has become the most valuable strategic resource of all. A successful strike may delay a program, but delay is not the same as resolution. Infrastructure can be rebuilt. Engineers can redesign, governments can adjust their priorities. What looks decisive in the moment often becomes only one chapter in a much longer contest. That's the pain point for anyone hoping modern conflicts have quick, permanent solutions. They rarely do. The headlines celebrate dramatic moments because they are easy to understand. The slow, expensive process of adaptation receives far less attention, even though it ultimately determines the balance of power. This is why policymakers, allies, and citizens should be cautious about absolute claims of victory. In geopolitics, today's breakthrough often becomes tomorrow's new starting point. Every action changes the calculations, but very few end the calculation altogether. And perhaps that is the most enduring lesson of all. In a contest between persistence and technology, time is often the only force that never stops advancing.